Hey everyone, Roadbreach here, and today we're taking a look at Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Transformers Fall of Cybertron is a third-person shooter developed by High Moon Studios and published by Activision for PC, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360 on August 21st, 2012. This game is a sequel to Transformers Fall of Cybertron, and is generally held up as one of the best Transformers games, and the series was sabotaged due to Activision's greed and stupidity. I've said it once, and I'll say it as many times as I need to. F*** you, Activision. I figured it would be fun to look at some Transformers games in anticipation for Transformers Rise of the Beasts, because if Jado can do it with Star Wars, then I can do it with Transformers. Unlike last time, I'm going to use the PC version of this game because when I was trying to get footage of the Xbox 360 version, my controller kept disconnecting, and since I need to get footage of the multiplayer, I might as well get it on PC to kill two birds with one stone, and get all my footage from the PC version. With all that out of the way, let's transform, roll out, and see what this game has to offer. To start off, the game's visuals are better than War for Cybertron. Even compared to the PC version of WFC, this game's lighting looks much nicer than its predecessor, and the environments are far more varied. The color palette is more vibrant as well. I don't ask that a game be plastered with blindingly bright colors, but I do ask that the color palette should be less muted than it was in War for Cybertron. The character designs are very similar to the last game. I personally feel like Starscream's design is a downgrade, and I don't understand why Optimus looks different. I don't hate how Optimus looks in this game, I just don't understand why they overhauled his design here. Megatron's asymmetrical arms were the one part of his design that didn't work for me, but his arms on his new chassis he gets later in the game looks way better to me. They look far less structural and cool. They also reused some assets from War for Cybertron in the multiplayer, like the power cells and weapon boxes. One thing that does have me scratching my head is where all these rocky locations were in War for Cybertron. I was under the assumption that Cybertron was completely made of metal, and War for Cybertron seemed to have proved that to be true. But here comes Fall of Cybertron giving us locales on Cybertron that very clearly have rocks and soil. I just don't get it. But anyway, facial animations are way better, and Megatron no longer looks like a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. One thing I felt indifferent about in War for Cybertron was the idle animations. The idle animations here have a lot more things moving. Though I do have to ask, what's going on here? Why is all this stuff moving? The weapons look less earthly this time around. There's not a single gun that looks like it came from Earth. The Neutron Assault Rifle now has dual rotating barrels, and the Scatter Blaster looks less like your typical pump-action shotgun. This version of the game also runs at a buttery smooth 60 FPS on my PC with almost no stuttering. To put that into perspective, my computer is rocking an AMD Ryzen 5 3600 6-core processor, and the newest Ryzen processors are 7000 series. So my PC is able to handle this game pretty well. Once again, the music is fine, but not really worth talking about. Voice acting is still pretty good, and the sound design helps make this game very immersive with the way the voices will reverberate in certain environments. One thing I got wrong from the last game was that Megatron is voiced by Jason Marnocha, when that's not true. Jason Marnocha voices Siege Megatron. Fred
Tatasiri
voices Megatron in these games. In my defense, it's difficult to specify what you mean when two things have the same name. One thing I find interesting is that Jazz, whom I love for his personality and charisma, is voiced by Troy Baker, who does a near-perfect impression of Benjamin Sherman Carruthers.
The signal is really strong now. Might belong to Sludge.
Sludge? Wasn't he on Grimlock's team? Why would he be down there?
Not sure if he had a choice.
Why?
Call it a hunch. Pow! Trailbreaker! Wheeljack! Ironhide, Mirage, Sunstreaker!
I know that some people are going to have an issue with a white guy voicing Jazz, and I get that, but for what it's worth, Troy Baker does a good job bringing Jazz to life. One thing that's a little unfortunate is that the pre-rendered cutscenes have a low resolution. This is most likely to contend with the hardware of the time, and these were probably the same resolution as the in-game graphics back then. Besides that, this game's presentation is really good, but beauty is only skin deep. So, how does this game play? Fall of Cybertron is a third-person shooter, but unlike War for Cybertron, this game feels more restrictive with its gameplay. Enemy encounters will often make it feel like the only option to survive is to shoot from cover, though this is definitely a skill issue on my part. The enemies are certainly far smarter than they were on medium difficulty in this game. Movement feels slower than in WFC, and you have a sprint that you can use when you hold down the dash button. The sprint has terrible maneuverability, the turning feels very stiff, and you can't make sharp turns. Why do this when I can transform? Let's talk about weapons. The Neutron Assault Rifle makes a return. This time it holds 36 shots per magazine, but is still applicable to many different situations. The Subsonic Repeater is a submachine gun that holds 40 shots per magazine and is meant for close quarters battle. It doesn't do too much damage, but this thing fires pretty quick, so I definitely think it makes up for that. The Proton Burst Rifle holds 18 shots per magazine and fires in 3-round bursts, and has a scope for long-range combat. The Path Blaster is a pistol that holds 8 shots per magazine. This thing has some really good accuracy and range, so it can be used for many different situations. The Scatter Blaster is a shotgun that holds 8 shots per magazine, but its range is terrible. What did I say about the shotguns in War for Cybertron again? As somebody who's addicted to Doom, the shotguns are a little disappointing. The EMP shotgun is a powerful weapon that holds 2 shots per magazine, but its spread is tighter than I would like. The Scatter Blaster holds 6 shots per magazine, but it's not as powerful. The spread on this one is a little less tight than the EMP shotgun, but you still have to be very deliberate with your shots for both of them. Yeah, well, at least that game understood the range of shotguns. The Nucleon Charge Rifle is a sniper rifle that holds 4 shots per magazine and does some great damage when fully charged, but like you would expect, the rate of fire is pretty slow. The Riot Cannon is a modified rocket launcher that holds 4 shots per magazine. It does great damage, but its projectiles move slower than I would like. The Electro Bolter holds 5 shots per magazine and launches harpoon-like projectiles that pierce enemies and knock them back. The EDK Tech Volt is a lightning gun that holds 50 volts, I guess, per magazine, and locks onto enemies, but it consumes ammo like a motherfucker. If you bought the Fury Pack DLC, you'll also get the Throwback Blaster that makes sounds from the G1 cartoon, but this thing sucks ass. It holds 10 shots per magazine, but its damage output is awful. You basically need to get a headshot for this thing if you want it to be effective at all. All of these were the primary weapons though. So let's talk about the heavy weapons. The X-12 Scrapmaker is a chain gun that holds 200 shots per magazine, and it's pretty devastating, though it does take a little while for it to charge up to fully unleash its destructive capabilities. The Thermo Rocket Cannon holds 1 shot per magazine, but it shoots 3 rockets at once that can lock onto enemies, and it deals great damage. The A4 Pulsar Cannon is a grenade launcher that holds 3 shots per magazine, and the projectiles fly straight and stick to whatever they're fired at, or can be detonated with the iron sight button. The Corrosive Slime Cannon holds 5 shots per magazine, and the projectiles have great radial damage that damages enemies over time. The Gear Shredder holds 6 shots per magazine, and fires discs that can ricochet off walls and cut up enemies. The Chaos Rift Combustor is a cluster bomb launcher that holds 1 shot at a time, but the cluster of explosives it lets out makes a pretty good trade-off. This thing rocks. The Cyber Corruptor holds 1 shot per mag, and it brainwashes enemies for them to fight for you, but the effect does wear off after some time. The Energon Harvester is a shotgun that holds 6 shots per magazine, and has 2-round burst fire. If you're the type of guy that wants a machine gun and a shotgun in your loadout to be ready for different situations, then this is a pretty good option. There's the Glass Gas Cannon that holds 4 shots per mag, and sends bots into stasis before smashing them. The other DLC weapon that you get from the Fury Pack is the Slingshock that fires wide projectiles that are very likely to hit multiple enemies because of how they spin, and they do great damage. Both primary and heavy weapons have separate ammo types that you need to pick up, and heavy ammo is far more scarce than primary ammo. You also have a melee attack that has a small grace period before you can launch another one. Grenades are now taken up by gadgets, tracking mines, a sentry bot, and ammo cache to name a few. And the button that used to be used to launch grenades is now the hand switching button, so you can get a better angle on your enemies to shoot at them. Killing enemies gives you credits that you can use to upgrade weapon attributes, buy perks and gadgets, and change up your loadout at the Teletran shop. These things can be found in some spots around the levels, and you can find blueprints for weapons and audio logs that help fill out some of the lore. Unlike WFC, the classes aren't really a thing in this game, until you get to the multiplayer. But every bot does have an ability that is situational for the level. Plus, every bot has the ability to dash. And since this is a Transformers game, we now need to talk about the transforming in the game. When you transform into a land vehicle, you can move in any direction, but you're not that quick. But you can hold down the iron sight button to move forward faster than you would if you were hovering forward, and you steer left or right like a car. There's also a boost that you need to let recharge after you use it. Flying vehicles work similarly, but you can ascend and descend with jump and hand switching button. You can also fire weapons in vehicle mode, which are either rapid fire or explosive, but if you're a flyer, you can switch between either or. There's also the addition of stealth that, at least to me, seems like a strange inclusion in a Transformers game of all things. That said, I do think it works well, but the stealth takedowns are ridiculous. If I'm sneaking around an enemy facility with armed guards that outnumber me, I don't think it would be a good idea to plant a fucking bomb on the guy that I need to pacify. And much like WFC, there are instances of obstacles and platforming. One thing that's interesting is how levers work in this game. You need to hit a button to approach it and pull the stick down to use it. I guess this was done for some sense of immersion, but it's just unnecessary in hindsight. Like, why do I need to do this? This is not how levers worked in War for Cybertron, so why is this how they work here? I guess we can talk about the enemies now. Soldiers are equipped with the Neutron Assault Rifle and will fire at you from cover and throw grenades at you. They will need to reload, which is something you can take advantage of. Shotgunners are equipped with the Scatter Blaster and will advance on you, and these guys have more health. Leapers are big bots that will leap after you, hence the name, punch you, and try to ram you. You can shoot them head on, but you will need to shoot them in the back in order to do any substantial damage. Snipers will float around, stick to walls, and fire at you from a distance. Rocket soldiers will fire at you with rockets, but much like regular soldiers, they have to reload, which opens them up for attack. Marauders are big four-legged tanks that fire massive ordnance at you and are best taken down with airstrikes. Insecticons are bugs that will burrow and attack you when they come back up. Taking them out with a scatter blaster is pretty fun. There are titans that are armed with the Scrapmaker and will barrage you with bullets and repair themselves with drones that you need to take out. Buggies will blitz you as they shoot at you, and I find it a little strange that they don't transform. Flyers will fly around, shoot at you, and launch sticky grenades that you need to transform to disable. These things that I'm going to call stalkers are able to detect you even if you're cloaked, and will transform to barrage you with gunfire. They can be taken out with gunfire of your own, but they can take quite a bit of abuse, which is a good incentive to use stealth. There are more mechanics I could talk about, but let's talk about the story for now. The game starts with the Autobots leaving Cybertron on their new ship, the Ark, but they get accosted by the Decepticons, and Bumblebee is told to go reactivate the ship's defense network. After reactivating the pulse cannons, Bumblebee is told to go help Optimus, but when he gets there, he gets a direct hit from a shock cannon, and Optimus gives a summary of the events before this game. We cut to 6 days before the launch with the Autobots preparing for said launch. But the Decepticons aren't going to let them leave so easily, so the Autobots need to fend off the cons from Iacon, and Optimus needs to find a way to destroy the Decepticons' warp cannons that are targeting the Ark. At the same time, the Autobots need to save their engineers who are trapped in the nerve center at the South Gate. So the Autobots fight off the cons and disable the bomb they were going to use to break in, but not before blowing up the cons with the turret, which is a pretty satisfying sequence. We meet up with Perceptor, and after we locate another fuse for him, he tells Optimus that there are some artillery units that they can use to repel Megatron's forces. But Perceptor can't get them online because they're old and they don't have enough energon, among other things. So Optimus needs to get the guns online. After getting the long-range artillery system online, Perceptor tells Optimus about the neutron gun at the flight deck that they can use. After getting to the gun, we now have to use the gun to blow up the tanks with the neutron gun to defend the fueling station until the gun runs out of energon. As Optimus is about to go back to the nerve center, the door he came through shuts automatically, and he's somewhere that isn't on the schematics, where he finds a Titan named Metroplex. So Optimus and Metroplex go to destroy 2 of the warp cannons, but the 3rd cannon takes out Metroplex, so Optimus needs to take it out himself. But he gets ambushed by Starscream and taken to Megatron, where he lectures Optimus about how this is his doing. But Metroplex comes back online and decimates Megatron, which scares the Decepticons enough to make them flee the scene. Unfortunately, there's not enough energon to launch the Ark, so they need to find more energon, and Optimus believes that Grimlock may know where to find some. Grimlock left his post for some reason, so Jazz and Cliffjumper are off to find him. The Decepticons are also here, so Cliffjumper needs to be quiet. You can transform to hide in vents, which activates tactical centers to show you where enemies are, so you can know when it's safe to come out. It turns out that this facility is an energon refinery because there's plenty of the byproduct of energon refinement in this facility. On the way, Jazz finds a distress signal coming from a pit that the Decepticons seal up with a massive door that they're going to need to blow open. Luckily, the byproduct of energon refinement is something Jazz can use to rig up a bomb to blow open the door. We now need to escort the bomb to the door, but the Decepticons will shoot at the bomb while you do. I guess the trolley moves slowly because the bomb is so heavy that it makes it move slow. Once the door is blown open, Jazz tells Cliffjumper to stay and look out for cons, but Cliffjumper wants to check out the distress signal, but Jazz decides to jump down where he finds Sludge is in stasis lock. So Jazz decides to take his memory core and play it back, where it seems that whatever Grimlock and his team were going through was pretty nasty. Jazz meets up with Cliffjumper, and they find a massive reservoir of raw energon that the cons are draining. But on the way to the refinery, Jazz runs into some snipers and rocket soldiers that you need to snipe with the charge rifle while using Jazz's grappling hook to move to different vantage points, which is a pretty fun sequence. If there's another game with platforming like this, then I would love to know about it. Jazz finds some controls to make a bridge to get to the door, but some debris gets stuck in the gears, and he needs to shoot the chain to form the bridge. We later learn that this refinery is actually a space bridge that can open wormholes to other galaxies. We run into Shockwave and Starscream arguing over the value of the space bridge. Starscream believes that Shockwave's experiments are taking up too much time, whereas Shockwave believes jumping across space with it could be valuable for them. Starscream orders Shockwave to pump the reservoir, and Cliffjumper tries to get the jump on Shockwave, but he's too smart for that. Jazz shoots the console, which ruins Shockwave's plans, so he goes to repair the fuel lines while the Insecticons deal with the Autobots. Jazz then gets the idea to overload the systems and destroy the facility, so Cliffjumper hops on the console while Jazz fights off the Insecticons. When the server core overloads, Jazz and Cliffjumper get the hell out of here with a fun driving sequence, and they make it safely onto Sideswipe's ship where they radio Prime about the reservoir, and that gives Ironhide the idea to use an old refinery transport to transport the Energon to Iacon. But of course the Decepticons aren't going to let the Autobots transport the Energon without any trouble, so Starscream has Onslaught explain the plan to stop them, by essentially destroying the bridge and leading them into an ambush. I really like this scene. It gives us some insight into the Combaticons' characters, the shot composition and voice acting is pretty good, and the plan in question is pretty clever. Vortex and Blastoff head to the bridge, and Brawl meets up with Vortex to destroy the bridge supports. However, the bridge supports are heavily shielded, so Vortex has to go in and disable the shielding so Brawl can take them out. But even with the supports destroyed, there's one last central support holding up the bridge. Brawl makes an entrance for Vortex to get in and destroy the central support. Now that the transport is diverted, the Decepticons can begin their assault on the transport, but the transport is too heavily armed to do much of anything to stop it. So Swindle goes under the transport to take out the wheel struts to stop it from moving, but in doing this, I need to ask, how does this thing steer? It doesn't look like the front wheels have a rack and pinion for them to rotate left and right, so does it turn like a tank? It seems like this thing is too long for it to do that, so how does it turn? And why are the wheel struts not heavily guarded? This thing has cannons, so it was obvious that they thought of a possible attack on the transport, so why is it that the wheel struts are easy to take out? But anyway, after the wheel struts are destroyed, the transport has another trick up its sleeve, and transforms into a flying machine.
Question! The transport can fly! Why didn't it just do that to begin with?
That's a very good question, Swindle, and it's actually got a decent answer.
Probably takes a lot of energy to float that hunk of junk.
This thing is said to be a fuel hog, so I could imagine that fuel efficiency in the air is most definitely way worse than it is on the ground. So they probably didn't have it fly to begin with for that reason, and the Autobots were saving the flight as a last resort. Anyway, Swindle has to take out 2 anti-aircraft guns on the transport. You need to open up the feeding chutes and blow up the shells on the first one, and the other one with a dropship's turret, while avoiding the gun's projectiles. And after that, one of the coolest things happens. After the Combaticons destroy the anti-aircraft guns, Onslaught says they need to take control of the ship, so they combine to form Bruticus, who you can actually play as. Bruticus can utterly decimate anything in his path with melee attacks, a flamethrower, and a shockwave ability that needs to recharge after use. However, you do need to make use of the shield to block enemy fire, which can also be used to kill enemies. The only issue is that I feel Bruticus moves too slowly for my taste. I feel he could have stood to move a little bit faster than this. Otherwise, I think it would be cool if more Transformers games had playable combiners. Maybe a future update for Transformers Reactivate. Bruticus destroys the turbine, which causes the transport to come crashing down, and the Combaticons need to try and control the crash. After the Combaticons manage to control the crash, Starscream confronts them for not following his orders and arrests them for disobeying him. We cut over to Soundwave's workshop, where two Decepticons are dumping Autobot corpses into it, and they leave when Starscream requests their presence. Turns out Soundwave is here, and he uses the Tech Volt to resurrect Megatron. This is a series of mini-games where you need to connect Megatron's arms when the current is at its peak. After Megatron awakens, he's confused about where he is, and Megatron wants to know where Starscream is and kick his skid plate to Iacon.
Who dares to disrupt my coronation?
Coronation, Starscream! This is bad comedy.
He said it! He said it!
Megatron proves that he's still a fierce gladiator and scares Starscream away from the throne, though I'm pretty sure Starscream should be scraps after that hit. Starscream has exhausted their energon, so Megatron wants to find a power core to get them to a planet that has natural resources that they need. So the Decepticons go to the crater that Trypticon crashed into, and on the way to the crater, the Autobots are contacting Optimus about the Megatron sightings, and Megatron kills the Autobots contacting him, and Megatron lectures Prime about how his ideals are what made Cybertron into the wasteland it is, and promises to bring him oblivion. When the Decepticons get to Trypticon, we learn that the Autobots disassembled him while he was still alive. The thought of this is utterly terrifying. Granted, Trypticon was killing several innocent people, and he probably deserved it, but it's still creepy to think about, and the audio log from Perceptor makes him sound psychotic.
Has Optimus witnessed firsthand the sight of Trypticon disassembled, pulled from limb to limb? His still-living carcass slowly bled dry by our leaching tubes. Does war give us the right to live like parasites off our fallen enemies? I am hopeful that those wiser than me see issues such as this more clearly than I.
Something tells me Cybertron doesn't have anything similar to the Geneva Convention if this shit is allowed. So we gotta put him back together by deactivating the bonders holding his body parts. Soundwave comes in to hack the console and refuel Trypticon, but while he does that, we need to fend off Autobots with the assistance of automated turrets. After Trypticon is re-energized, Soundwave tells Megatron that he remains locked in stasis, and just before he gives Megatron an estimated repair time, Megatron tells him that he doesn't want him repaired, and tells Trypticon that he intends to turn Trypticon into a warship. Soundwave says that the new alternate form will be permanent in his damaged state, but Megatron doesn't care because he failed to destroy the Autobots in War for Cybertron, and Soundwave initiates the Nemesis Protocol. We cut to Shockwave's lab, where Shockwave's data logs are being hacked. So the Decepticons go down to the main server to see what's going on, and it turns out Starscream isn't going to take the L, and he believes that he can recruit Grimlock to build his new army. So he disables the shielding of the main tower, and pays a little visit to Grimlock, and he offers him freedom in exchange for his allegiance. But Grimlock doesn't care for his terms, and throws Starscream against the console, which sets him free so he can find his friends. Playing as Grimlock feels pretty gratifying. Smashing, throwing stuff, slashing, and the takedowns are pretty fun to watch if you need to blow off some steam. And much like Bruticus, he has a shield that you can use to block attacks. We meet up with Swoop, and he wants us to get him out by throwing 2 switches to unleash his restraints. On our way to find the others, we run into Hardshell and engage in a boss fight. You need to block or avoid his attacks, and throw fuel canisters at the turret. While you do this, other enemies will come in to fight you as well. Once you defeat him, Grimlock uses Hardshell's optical scan to open the door to the room that they believe is holding Slag.
Slag, slag, slag. His name is Slag. It's not slug, it's slag. I know it's a bad word in the UK, but it's not in the rest of the entire damn world.
And they find Slag has escaped through the bottom of his room. After killing some bugs, Shockwave contacts Grimlock to tell him that his combat skills have only marginally improved, and that his inability to transform is what's stopping him, and he believes Kickback may help him.
I remember you, Grimlock. Do you remember me? Me?
Of course he's not speaking correctly, because why should we have Transformers characters be consistent? We meet up with Kickback, and we have to fight a bug by dodging its charge attack, while wailing on its ass. Kinda like what I did to your mom. After defeating the bug, Grimlock overrides Shockwave's programming, and he's able to transform, and playing in Dino mode is pretty satisfying too. Dino mode needs to be recharged by killing enemies, by the way. and the takedowns for Robot Mode and Dino Mode can give you health. After being shown Grimlock's full destructive capabilities, Kickback tries to leave, but Slag comes in and crushes him under the door. The last spot we gotta save is Snarl, and you need to destroy the power conduits by killing bugs to charge up Dino Mode and burn them with Grimlock's Flame Breath. After Snarl is free, he gives Sharpshot what's coming to him, and they get Snarl some medical help. They also see that Shockwave's opening a portal to another planet, and Grimlock wants to take it out. They get contacted by Optimus, and he's glad to see that he's functioning. Grimlock tells Optimus about what's going on, and Optimus wants Grimlock to come back to the base. But Grimlock just wants to destroy the space bridge. Swoop takes Grimlock to the catwalk connected to the space bridge, and he smashes his way to Shockwave, but he restrains Grimlock and tells Megatron that he successfully opened the bridge to the planet that they want to go to. But Grimlock's rage is enough for him to break free and beat up Shockwave and disable the space bridge. Now Grimlock has to hightail it out of here, but he ends up not making it, and the destruction of the space bridge makes the portal unstable, so the Autobots need to launch the Ark pronto. Metroplex offers to give his Energon to launch the Ark, and while Optimus is hesitant to do so, he ends up doing it anyway, so the Autobots can leave. This is another good scene. The music, along with the cinematography, really emphasizes the gravity of Metroplex's sacrifice, and his last words make it all the more sad.
Till all are one.
But of course the Decepticons aren't going to let them escape so easily, so they launch tow cables at the Ark and begin their assault. This is where the game will switch back and forth between Autobots and Decepticons. You start off with Soundwave destroying the Energon silos so the cannons can't fire, then you switch to Jetfire to sever the tow cables, then you switch to Bruticus to get to the engine room, then you switch to Jazz to stop Bruticus from destroying the engines. This boss fight has you avoiding Bruticus's attacks while using Jazz's grappling hook to zip to his head to shoot him. Then you need to lure him into EMP mines, and use the grappling hook to knock him over and order Jetfire to airstrike him until he falls off the ship. We come back to the moment from the beginning of the game, and Optimus finally sees that no matter how vast the universe is, it will never be big enough for the two of them. And you get a choice between who you play as for the final fight of the game. Fighting against Megatron has you launching light and heavy attacks with a sword while avoiding or blocking Megatron's attacks. Megatron will also transform to fire at you, which is when you need to get up close while avoiding his attacks. After a couple of attacks, you're prompted to mash B to push him back and wail on him by pressing B. Fighting against Optimus works similar, but he'll transform to ram you and use a shockwave ability. In the end, it doesn't really matter who you fight as or against, because both result in the Autobots and Decepticons getting sucked through the portal. But because Activision sucks every dick in the book, there's no chance of this being followed up on. At least the game ends with The Touch by Stan Bush, which starts off remixed. And continues. You got the power! Yeah! And since I bought the PC version, I was able to get the multiplayer working, and I had some help from Rhea in the Discord server where I got the files to get it working. While I was looking for people to play with me when I looked at War for Cybertron, I speculated that far more people were playing Fall of Cybertron's multiplayer. So was I right? Well, yes, I was. I was able to consistently find people to play with me when I wanted to play Team Deathmatch. Other modes were far sparser with players, though. Multiplayer is pretty fun, and it can get pretty chaotic at times. Much like War for Cybertron, you have 4 different classes you can pick from, and each class can have 3 different loadouts. Customization is better this time. You can pick different parts to make your own bot, and you can pick the color scheme for which faction you're playing on. You can pick your loadout and attachments, you can apply decals, you can choose an ability, and pick the voice. Some armor sets are DLC that you need to purchase separately though, which you can buy on Amazon. I also like that G1 Optimus is a part of the Fury Pack, which was probably going to be used for a proper sequel if Activision had common sense. The maps are pretty big to encourage the use of transformation, and have plenty of things to use as cover. My favorite map is probably Convoy, which is definitely the Energon transport. The game also has map voting like Call of Duty, which I believe is a good addition that makes it feel more like a proper multiplayer game. Team Deathmatch is my favorite. Just kill your opponents more than they kill you. Deathmatch is the free-for-all mode, where you need to be the one with the most kills. Capture the Flag has you killing your enemies to take their flags, quote-unquote, and take them back to your base. Conquest has you capturing control points to slowly accumulate 400 points. To capture a point, you just need to stand in it. And Headhunter has you killing enemies so they drop sparks, so you can take them back to one of 2 nodes. Unlike War for Cybertron, you can't pick up your enemy's weapon when you kill them. And since weapons are limited to what class you pick in multiplayer, you can't have as much freedom in that department. The multiplayer also changes the function of the Cybercorruptor into the orbital pistol, which marks the enemy you use it on and decreases their armor. And the final mode is Escalation, but unlike last time, I'm able to play it. Escalation is the Horde survival mode a la Call of Duty Zombies. You fight increasingly difficult waves of enemies, and you use the money you get from kills to buy weapons, ammunition, activate traps, and open doors to new areas. If your teammate gets downed, you have to go and revive them, but you have 3 lives as a safety net in case your teammate can't get to you, or if you're playing alone. If you love Call of Duty Zombies and Transformers, then I would definitely recommend this mode. And overall, this game is great. Transformers Fall of Cybertron is a fun Transformers game that improves on some things and adds new things that work pretty well, and the story is certainly on par with the first game. If you're a Transformers fan, definitely give it a try. Thanks for watching, and gotta zoom.